Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Fear Street Part 3, 1666. Fear Street 1666 is the final movie in the horror trilogy based on the R.L. Stine novels of the same name, and it's actually a bit of a misnomer to call it 1666 because that's not the only time period that's featured in the story. Obviously, the majority of this movie takes place in 1666. It centrally focuses on the character of Sarah Fear, specifically what her life was like during that particular year, and what led to her being labeled as a witch by her community, what led to her execution, and ultimately what led to her supposedly placing a centuries-long curse on the town of Shadyside. After the movie finishes exploring that time period, it switches gears back to 1994, where everything finally comes to a head. The mystery has been solved, the culprit has finally been revealed, and it's up to Dina and Josh and a few other supporting characters to kill the person responsible for the curse before they end up getting killed themselves and the truth is lost forever. As far as characters are concerned, there's nobody really new per se. In fact, insofar as the 1666 portion is concerned, you tend to see a lot more familiar faces than new ones, albeit in a different sort of way, if that makes any sense. In 1666, virtually all the characters are portrayed by actors/characters who you recognize from the previous two movies, and in the case of Dina, she happens to fill the role of none other than Sarah Fear. It's clear early on when watching this movie that Sarah Fear is nothing at all like the legends in the previous two movies make her out to be. Rather than portraying her as this sort of evil woman practicing her witchcraft behind the scenes and having it out for everyone in the village of Union where she lives, she just happens to be a regular woman like everyone else around her. Well, regular may not exactly be the right word. As it happens, she bears a resemblance to the character of Dina from 1994, not just in a physical sense, but also in the sense that she's engaging in a forbidden lesbian relationship with another character in 1666, that character being Hannah Miller, who bears a physical resemblance to Sam, who happens to be Dina's girlfriend from 1994. I like how the filmmakers drew parallels between the relationships of Dina and Sam and that of Sarah and Hannah. Both couples are ostracized for having relationships which deviate from the norm, and in 1666's case, it's a lot more poignant because you have to consider the religious beliefs that people had during that era, and I don't think we have to spend too long imagining what women's rights were like back then in general, much less what people would have thought about the idea of two women being a couple. As I mentioned earlier, there are a variety of other characters as well that are featured in 1666, most of which are portrayed by actors that you'll recognize from the first two movies. I'm not going to get in depth with any of them in this review because otherwise I'd be talking forever, but I appreciate that the filmmakers found a creative and unique way to utilize the talents of the actors once more in this movie rather than relegating them to just one movie in the series. The only thing I found weird about the characters in this movie, at least in 1666, is that they all seem to have this weird hybrid Scottish-Irish accent going on that just didn't sound right. I understand that the movie takes place in 1666 and most people living in America in that time, apart from natives, were European immigrants, so it makes sense for them to have an accent to a certain degree, but the accent never felt consistent across all the characters in this movie, not to mention the fact that in my opinion all the accents just plain sounded horrible. The thing I appreciate the most about this movie is how unique it is, not just the fact that it takes place in such an unusual time period in human history, but that its horror elements also take a more supernatural twist this time around, as opposed to the traditional slasher stuff that we've gotten in the past two movies. A lot of the horror in this movie comes from the hysteria behind the witchcraft. Food goes rotten, livestock goes berserk, water runs out of the well, and then people start to get sick and go insane. You can just feel the tension bubble over to a boil within the first 10 minutes of this movie starting. Make no mistake though, the movie has its fair share of gory violence. There's a really disturbing scene at the halfway point of the 1666 arc that is far more gruesome than any other scene in the entire trilogy. The movie makes effective use of these horrifying scenes sparingly but effectively, and it makes us want to root for the main characters that much more and see them overcome the hysteria of the townspeople. The 1994 portion of this movie has a lot of fun slasher stuff saved for the end as well. All of the killers reunite for one big explosive finale in a showdown between them and the main characters, and it was a ton of fun to see all the hijinks and violence play out on camera. And as you can expect with it being the final film in a trilogy, the mystery behind the curse of Shadyside is concluded once and for all, and I gotta say, after it was all said and done, I found it to be very satisfying. If there were any leftover questions you might have had from watching Part 2, Part 3 pretty much answers the rest of them, at least the important ones anyway. One question that I'm glad this movie answered, and it's something that's bugged me since Part 1, was that it actually explained why Sunnyvale had such a huge economical advantage over Shadyside. Another thing that I really liked about this movie is how it finally revealed the culprit that was responsible for all of Shadyside's misfortunes. It's a little bit predictable if you've been paying attention to certain things throughout the previous two movies, but nonetheless I still enjoyed the reveal, as well as them explaining their evil plot. The reveal of the evil plot has a lot of dramatic heft behind it, and it gets even better when Sarah is about to be hanged for witchcraft. It is the most powerful scene in the entire trilogy. The music, the cinematography, the dialogue, the emotion of the moment, everything about that scene is on point. I could have sworn I was watching an Oscar award-winning movie when I watched it. Overall, Fear Street 1666 is without a doubt the best one in the entire trilogy. Really, you can't go wrong with any movie in the series, but this one in particular stands out the most. Obviously, if you've seen the first two movies in the trilogy, you're gonna love the heck out of this one. And if by some chance you haven't seen any movie in this trilogy yet, I do encourage you to check them out, as long as you're a fan of horror movies in the first place. I thoroughly enjoy what this trilogy has been able to accomplish. It is both entertaining as a series of horror movies and meaningful for its advocacy of LGBT rights, and I really hope we get to see more movies from this franchise in the future. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Fear Street 1666. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Thai sci-fi drama, Deep. Bye-bye.